Phase 2B, we're going to have a quick update on what this is from Dean Harris from Homes England. And Dean, I'll leave it to you to introduce Keep Moat as well, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, Dean from Homes England. I'm very pleased to say that Homes England have appointed Keep Moat as our development partner for the next phase of Northstowe within Phase 2, Phase 2B. So I'm going to pass you over to Keep Moat and their team, James, Craig and Nigel.
Thanks, Dean. Evening, Chair. Thank you for the invitation, obviously, along to present this evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine, thank you.
Excellent, that's great. If at some point you struggle to hear me, please just flag me down. Unfortunately, in the times we're in at the moment, we have to find the safest or most convenient place in the house in the evening for meetings like this, and my internet signal is not known to be particularly strong in the dining room, I'm afraid. So if I turn the video off, if there's a struggle, it should be fine.
Okay.
So my colleague Craig Jones from Boone Brown is sharing the presentation that you can see on screen. We've got a short presentation for you this evening, just to update on our progress and provide some context. We're also joined by James Whelan from Keep Moat, although again, in advance, just to forewarn you, he did drop out for a good half hour and was following us on Facebook. So I know that he's attempting to be in the room, but he may struggle as well. So as Dean has just said, we are here representing Keep Moat Homes. They've been appointed as a development partner for Homes England to take forward the second part of Phase 2 in terms of residential parcels. Thank you, Craig, for interpreting there. By way of introduction, what we're going to do in this presentation, to keep it short and to the point, is that I'm going to provide an overview and context to the project, an introduction briefly to the development team and the key players within that, talk broadly about the project goals and the current programme, ultimately leading up to making our application to the council for reserved matters approval and detailed approval of some of the conditions, before handing over a few slides in to Craig from Boone Brown, the architecture practice, who I'll introduce shortly. This is, as we said, Phase 2B. It's the second phase, confusingly, of the second phase. Phase 2 in outline planning terms, and apologies if I overly detail the context here for some, was for 3,500 homes, a town centre, associated facilities including schools and sports pitches and the like. This application comes after the approval in February last year of reserved matters and detailed approval of conditions for Phase 2A, and to show the relationship of our project parcel, you can see on the drawing here in the blue, we have the town centre area that's set aside within Phase 2. In yellow, you have Phase 2A, and in red hatching with an arrow pointing out that is Rampton Drift. Confusingly, Rampton Drift is not somewhere distant off to the north, it is in the red hatching. So the Phase 2 development has set in place by way of the outline planning permission parameters for land use, for movement, open space and other factors which we're bound by. We will also be cognizant of other strategies that have followed on from the Phase 2 outline approval, including design code and other strategies like the youth and play strategy, town centre strategy as well, which we will come on to, particularly in respect to the design code in a moment. Craig, if I could have the next, thank you. For those who are not familiar with Keep Moat, just a run through. They are a top 10 UK house builder in terms of size. They're the 7th largest in England, and focused very much on high quality development. They're a 5-star house builder. They've worked on a significant number of projects with Homes England in the past, delivering some 13,000 homes with them. and so have a good working relationship, and looking to deliver a high quality development on this parcel. Craig, thank you. In terms of the development team, I won't go exhaustively through them, but the key actors that have been appointed by KeepMoat include Boone Brown, who are an award-winning RIBA chartered architecture practice with offices in London and Somerset, significant experience in delivering sites of this scale and type. We've got on board a Landscape Institute registered practice of a firm of landscape architects who will be assisting in delivering the green spaces and landscaping and green infrastructure through the parcel. And then ourselves, we are responsible for delivering planning consultancy input and ultimately submitting and bringing together the application and responding and working with the council. So in terms of overview, the project goals here, as we've said, as a development partner with Homes England, is to bring forward an application, much as was the case with phase 2A, which was itself a hybrid application of both reserved matters or detailed planning for those that are not planners, that flesh out the required information to bring forward the proposals. And as I've said, it will basically be derived in a filtered way from the outline planning permission framework. It will respond to the site constraints identified to date, and we're working hard to realise the opportunities that have been set out in key documents like the design code and other strategies. We've begun, in terms of our programme, our pre-application engagement with South Cambridgeshire District Council. We've approached them for our first pre-application in late last year in November. We've entered into also a planning performance agreement to secure resource and close working practices with their officers and key stakeholders. And we've come through the first pre-application, which was very much based and targeted at establishing principles and compliance with the key documents and strategies, and into some workshops which are running currently in January on key topics, with a goal to a more detailed pre-application submission in February, at which point other key engagement sort of targets will start to come through, including presenting to the design quality panel and holding a public exhibition and any key stakeholder meetings that fall out of that. Ultimately, in terms of our programme, we're hoping to submit an application in the spring. We need to get the application ready and right, but that is a target we're working hard to meet. And then with a statutory target for the council to determine that at some point in the summer. And of course, after applications are submitted, for everyone's benefit, of course, there's further engagement by the council with local residents and key stakeholder groups. Of course, it doesn't stop with our submission. The consultation exercise then passes like a baton to the local authority, who will then judge any scheme that we submit. In terms of delivery, the aspirations are to try and make some form of commencement on the site in the later part of the year. Obviously, with significant sort of early stage infrastructure requirements being put in, that may start to see homes built into 2022, and with an estimated very early ballpark sort of timescale for completion into autumn 2025 or thereabouts. So what I'm going to do now is pass Craig over to Craig, rather, to run through the sort of parameters of the site and its context in a bit more detail, and also the progress that we've made to date, and to run you through our draft and emerging proposals.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see the drawings clearly. This aerial photo on the bottom corner of the page indicates in red dashed line the outline of phase 2B. The most pertinent issue is it bounds Rampton Drift directly to the south. So the southern boundary of Rampton Drift is the northern edge of our development site. And as Nigel alluded to, to the east we'd have the new town centre as that develops. So these photos were taken some time ago last year. The site is changing with infrastructure works, but it's a relatively level field of land with a number of trees around it, a good tree line towards Rampton Drift, which will ultimately be sort of substantiated in our new design. And our western boundary is formed by the old military road that's still present and seen on this photograph here. The houses, the Rampton Drift houses at the north, back onto our site, so we've got rear gardens with a timber fence, and then there's a separate palisade fence within the site, which will ultimately be removed and form part of the landscape site. In terms of our design proposal, we're led strongly by the design code that was approved as part of the Outline Planning Permission. The design code sets quite a number of succinct parameters. First one is how we move through the site. Obviously ensuring that there's good, strong connectivity for cyclists, pedestrians, drivers, to all parts of the development, both from our site and connecting to other adjoining neighbourhoods. The principal movement, we have an access point to the south of Rampton Drift in the northeast corner of our site. That's our principal entrance, and then there's a lateral run east and west to allow movement through to other phases. And our site then is really subdivided by a series of residential streets, all of which are prescribed in terms of scale, size, design, and how they're built up in terms of landscape zones, car parking, quantities, etc. So we're following that discipline within our design development and ensuring that we comply fully with the development site design code. There are also character zones described in the design code. Our site sits within largely what's described as Oakerton Barracks, and that zone itself is determined by a very regimented orthogonal grid of development, streets that have largely terraced housing, clear perpendicular routes, and the street designs I mentioned before, and that creates the design pattern for our basis for our proposal. The development is largely housing, which will step from 2 stories within the northern area, and then with freedom to increase up to 3 stories in areas where we so choose as we move south. And there are opportunities for some small numbers of blocks of flats within the scheme as well. Also, there's a suggestion that maybe a local commercial facility could be included within the development. One key aspect of phase 2 as a totality is the way that green corridors are threaded through the development and link and create routes through, as I say, green corridors for cyclists, for pedestrians, a desire to promote sustainable travel and accessibility, permeability throughout the development. We have a number of greenways, as a so-called bounding phase 2B. On the northern edge, which you can't really see clearly in this image, but you'll see better later on, there's a requirement for a reasonable green edge between our development and Rampton Drift, which would be used for play and cycleways, designated cycle routes and pedestrian ways. That then has a north-south linear greenway running through the site, which connects to the significant greenway at the bottom of the development at the southern edge, which runs east-west and connects to the new town park. The town park being a formal amenity recreation space that will sit at the southern edge of the new town centre. So there's a good, strong connectivity from north to south and running east to west of landscape zones and play spaces, outdoor recreational uses, not just for residents of phase 2B, but for the wider North Stowe development that we will be accommodating within our design and linking into. So in terms of how our design developed, initially we set off with a concept master plan that responds to the street pattern that then creates a series of blocks, grid patterns for buildings. Always looking to make sure that we've got active frontages, very clear delineation, using building lines to contain streets, and working very clearly with the 3 areas of greenway that I mentioned at the north, running north-south and down at the bottom. We've been looking very carefully at where we put our activity zones, and whilst we'll be providing formal play and recreational spaces, we will also be linking into that interactive spaces, so play on the way and incidental recreational uses, to ensure that there's a very strong theme of placemaking within our development, and it's resident led. It's as pedestrian and cyclist friendly as it can be, whilst accommodating motorists and parking, and ensuring that streets have good strong activity in the whole hierarchy, from secondary streets down to new streets. So as we started to build up the development, we looked at our housing typologies, and then connected that with the landscape zones, looking at how streets will be landscaped with swells and boulevarding, and connecting recreational spaces with apartments and the outdoor areas of the greenways, and started to look at on the right hand side some very illustrative images, if you can read those, of what those outdoor character spaces might be and how buildings put front onto them and how we control car parking, etc. These are events that we went through towards last year, and then in more recent times, as we've received through consultations with Homes England and the Planning Authority, as we've started to receive town centre strategies, testing our development to make sure we've got good, strong responses to how we link with that, both in terms of building elevations and street patterns, connections, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's all led to the current design in terms of form and massing that you can see here. And this should hopefully express the key access routes that cross our site from the town centre and then running.
Craig, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you have much more of the presentation? I'm just really aware that we've got quite a few things more to run. So I'm not, if you've got quite a few more slides, if we could just kind of summarise them.
I've got just a few and I can flip through them. So this is the master plan in the massing, in the typologies, etc., and the road patterns, and then some images of showing how the building designs are coming forward in consultation with the Planning Authority, and our house typologies, which you can have a copy of the presentation if you so wish, and then finally just looking at the more detailed aspects of the landscape and how the landscape is being threaded through the design development. That is the last image.
Thank you, Craig. So sorry to have rushed you, but if you do send me the presentation, we can definitely get that up onto the website and on social media for residents to take a closer look at. We actually don't have that many questions for you specifically, so just to thank you both for coming along and introducing Keepmoat and the next phase of housing on phase 2. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to